and begin with our prayer before study. Christ my Lord, the giver of light and wisdom, who opened the eyes of the blind man and transformed the fishermen into wise heralds and teachers of the gospel through the coming of the Holy Spirit, shine also in my mind the light of the grace of the Holy Spirit. Grant me discernment, understanding, and wisdom in learning. Enable me to complete my assignments and to abound in every good work, for to you I give honor and glory. Amen. Most blessed Lord, send the grace of your Holy Spirit on me to strengthen me, that I may learn well the subject I am about to study, and by it become a better person, for your glory, the comfort of my family, and the benefit of your church and our nation. Amen. All right, today we are going to get a much smaller dose of Aristotle than I intended you to get this year. But I really think going through the Republic more slowly was worth it. And I want to show you once again a picture that you have seen before, because it's awesome. By the way, I got the email yesterday that I got one of the Under St. Peter's tours to go down to St. Peter's tomb and to go into the crypt underneath, and the old Constantinian building ruins. Except that I've now been shut out of 2 major websites in Italy for being persistent, and then they say, you're banned from our link. Then I have to call my son and say, no, you have to buy this because I'm banned. My bank wouldn't let me buy them. You know, sometimes your bank says, oh, somebody weird is buying something in Italy with your, no, that's me. Not weird. So we're going to get that taken care of. Anyway, point being, this is in the Vatican Museum. So hopefully I will get to see the real deal. But this is popularly known as School of Athens. School of Athens. It's actually, it was in the Vatican study, in the Pope's study, and there were 4 paintings showing the branches of learning, the things that a good pope, a leader needs to know, and one of them is philosophy. So our 2 central figures here are Plato and Aristotle. And actually many of the other guys are figures that we have been able to identify. They're not only from the ancient world. We have Euclid is one of them. He's drawing pictures on the ground somewhere, but some of them are later scientists. And we have, Athena and Apollo looking over wisdom and the arts and that sort of thing. But the important thing about Plato and Aristotle is Plato is doing this with his finger. Yeah, we've talked about this. Yeah, but it's good to be reminded of things, and it's gonna come up in what we read, actually. And why is he doing this? Well, because think about the Republic. Think about what Plato was saying all the time. You need to rise up, come out of the cave, rise up through that divided line, and see the good, where the form, or we would say the idea, form can be misleading. They usually call them Plato's forms. But the Greek word is idea, but to us that means only in your head. But he doesn't mean it's only in your head. He means it exists outside of you. This is the place we concentrate on. And Aristotle is on this side. And he's holding a copy of the only complete book of Plato that they knew in the West in the Middle Ages, the Timaeus. It all got lost when the barbarians took over in the West. And only the people in the East still had Plato and Aristotle. But this is the one they knew, and this was painted by Raphael in the early Renaissance, so this is the one they knew. Okay, Aristotle, on the other side, is walking next to him, and he's doing this with his hand. He's doing this. So I want you to hold on to that idea, and as we look at books 1 and 2 of the Ethics today, maybe we can see why he's rejecting this and he's doing this. But it sums up their disagreements. And we're going to meet some of he mentions them by name. And we're going to meet some of their disagreements here when we go through these questions. Well, how was this reading-wise?
It was difficult, but I think I got a good understanding.
Yeah, I warned you. You kind of have to go slowly, right? You have to use some brain power and think, what does he mean by that? What is he saying? Or the sentence might be a little long or convoluted. Sometimes he uses pronouns, and you have to think, yeah, and this was, okay, what was this again? And you have to go back and say, what are we talking about? Oh, okay, this is what he's talking about. That's not you. That's not because you're a poor student. That's because Aristotle is a tough read. No, I don't know that this is one of them, but a lot of his works, we're not totally sure that what we have aren't his lecture notes. That would be pretty bad, wouldn't it? If you just got a hold of some professor's lecture notes and he just used them to jog his memory but all you had were the notes. Like, great, I have no idea how he intended those two things to be joined together. We're pretty sure that some of what we have are his lecture notes or are notes taken by students at a lecture, which again, you can imagine boy, that would be a big burden on you, wouldn't it? Like, I am the person. It's my notes from, Einstein's lectures or whatever that are getting passed down to posterity. We don't know, but he's very concise and very dense. So it's not. Plato is kind of rambling. Oh, I don't know. What do you think, Glaucon? I think I agree with you. And you can follow. But this is not like that. All right. So I want to look. I have no idea how long this is going to take us. I don't know if we'll get done super early. I don't know if we'll rush ahead. We might look a little bit at book 10 if we end early, just so you can find out what decision he reaches at the end. But the first thing we need to understand is what he means by an end, because this makes all the difference in how we read it. And I directed you towards a couple of places where he uses the word. What do you think Aristotle means when he says an end? Something is an end.
Completion. It
does not mean completion. What do you think, Emma?
A goal or a benefit of an activity?
A goal. Was that?
Oh, I was going to say something good.
A good, yes. So and so, but it might not be a good. For example, so what you said is the way we use it. That's what makes Aristotle hard to just pick him up, because he uses phrases, he uses things that aren't the way we use them anymore. But there's no other, maybe goal, as Emma said, would be a better translation now. But so the end of robbing a bank is to get money. I don't mean the end of the robbery is when I get the money. I mean the reason I did it. That was my goal, presumably. I don't know. Maybe I hate the bank owner and I just want to get back at him. I don't know. But generally, I feel like the end of, the end of stopping by Whitey's is to come out with some ice cream, right? So the end is the reason we do something. I'm going to throw something in here that I didn't intend to throw in, but because Aristotle talks this way often, not so much in what you read. The end is what he considers one of the four causes of everything. For Aristotle, everything has four causes, but they're not all what you think of as cause, okay? So, the efficient cause. I'm not going to write cause every time here. We have the material cause, the formal cause, and the final cause. Great. It's really not hard once you know what they mean. And then you discover, oh, yeah, everything does have those. Okay. we're building a house. The efficient cause is the person that makes the house be built. It could be the architect. It could be the contractor. It is the actual physical force that is putting it all together. Pretty much everything that exists has that, right? Somebody, the efficient cause of the cookies was your mom, or maybe it was you. The material, we should have done cookies. Oh, wait, let's do cookies instead of houses. Cookies are always more fun. Okay, so the efficient, I'm baking cookies. I'm baking pumpkin chocolate chip cookies. I'm not really. They're awesome though. Okay, so I'm the efficient cause. I'm the reason that the cookies will exist in the world. Any guesses what material cause might mean?
Material cause, like the ingredients.
The ingredients. What is it made of? The material cause of cookies is flour, sugar, butter, chocolate chips, in this case, can of pumpkin, not always, brown sugar, eggs, material cause. Okay. The formal cause of my cookies. Oh, this is good. Now, I make a lot of cookies at Christmas. I mean, like a lot of cookies, like over 1,000. One year I made 1,300 cookies. I don't know why I do this to myself. And then I have to find people to give them to. I brought them here and they ate them for 3 weeks. They had to put them in the freezer. But anyway, so that's the point. Some of them are the kind you just drop. My pumpkin chocolate cookies are like that. You just blah, blah, blah. They're drop cookies. Some of them I run them through a cookie press, right? And then I take the two together and I put chocolate in between and I make this little sandwich cookie. That's awesome. And then some of them are the kind where you make a little hole in the middle and you fill them with jam. And then I have others where I make a little hole in the middle and you fill them with melted caramel. Those are good. And then I drizzle chocolate over the top. Oh yeah, baby. Now, they don't all look the same. The formal cause is the way they look. The formal cause for the drop cookies is melting down and becoming a round circle. The formal cause for the cookie press cookies is the shape that I squeeze it through and it makes that shape, right? And then the formal cause for the ones with stuff in the middle is the shape I make when I stick my thumb in and I put stuff in the middle. It's what gives it its form. And then there's the final cause. That's the end. The final cause of cookies is to eat them and have a good time.
Amen.
And possibly regret it later. But, or it could be to give them away as Christmas gifts. You see, or both. So Aristotle likes to think of everything this way when he writes. He thinks about everything has these causes. Now, today, when scientists talk about things, they're talking about trees. No, let's not do trees. Let's try the moon. Okay? Okay. So material. We're pretty good on material. Like we've been to the moon. We've gathered rocks and dust and analyzed it, and we know the composition and stuff. We know what is not made of green cheese. We know this. We also know the formal. We know it's shaped like a sphere. It's got pits on it from being, whacked by meteors. Whacked is the right term. Now, let's look at this one. When modern science, in general, we're going to say modern non-Christian science, what caused the moon to be? What would be, does science do a very good job at addressing that?
No, not really.
The best they have is some sort of, swirling gases that condensed and eventually formed the moon. Christian perspective, God made it. God is the efficient cause of the moon. So they're really, modern science, really strong on these. We get weaker on this. what is the purpose of the moon? Does modern science address this at all?
No.
Not really.
It's just there. The Bible says that the stars and the moon and the sun were put there for signs and seasons to mark the passage of time, that they had a purpose. And to give us light during the night. But of course, it doesn't always give us light during the night, because if that's its sole purpose, then it's not doing a very good job half the time. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's not. So this used to be natural science. Everything we look at has these causes, and you see how it's kind of shrunk. We're not bigger than the ancients. We don't look more widely. We look more narrowly, because we don't even consider whether something has a purpose for existing. What's the purpose of a dog? You know, it's the purpose. But they did, okay? So when he says, what is the end? Aristotle literally means not only the goal, but the purpose for its existence. That's the end of something. Now, you can see why it now means the finish, because usually when you get to the finish, it's done, and you would say, well, that was the goal. Like if you're running a race, you get to the finish line, your final cause was to finish the purpose of it. Maybe it was just to get healthy, or maybe it was to challenge yourself, you know, but it was to get to the finish line, and so it's the end now of the race. All right, that's enough of that. That's what he means by end, if that helps a little bit. Okay. He says, this is how he starts out. Every art and every investigation, and similarly, every action and pursuit is considered to aim at some good. In other words, the end, the purpose, of every art, every action, everything we study, is considered to be some good. Hence, the good has been rightly defined as that at which all things aim. Clearly, however, there is some difference between the ends at which they aim. Some are activities and other results distinct from activities. Okay, some things we do produce something tangible, some don't. Some involve activity, some don't. Some we do so we can use that thing to do something else. So I go to the grocery store and I buy flour and sugar and eggs. But that's really not my end. My end was to make the cookies. So the whole trip to the grocery store was just a step. So if you said, what is the final cause of your trip to the grocery store? Make cookies. Not to go up and down the aisles and put things in my cart and buy them. That would be a subsidiary goal. So he goes on and he says, you know, it's like the military. You have people who are good at taking care of horses, right? But if they're military horses, their goal isn't just to deal with horses. Their goal is to get horses ready to use in battle. And the goal of using the horses in battle is to win the battle. So all of these things, you know, bridles and saddles and, you know, all of the accoutrements that a horse has in this case, the end of all of them is to win the battle. Does that make sense? So what he's asking here is, what in the world, is there a thing that everything aims at? Is there a good? Now, remember Socrates. What did he have to say about the good? Good afternoon, Father. Did he ever give us a definition of the good? No. When they asked him flat out, and what is this good? He's like, well, I don't know, but I can tell you what it's like. I can tell you the child of the good, which was, do you remember? The sun. The sun was like the good. But this is as far as Socrates takes us. There is something that is the good, and it is idea, it is a form, and it is the ultimate good. And by knowing it, everything else becomes clearer, and we become virtuous people. But I just couldn't tell you what that looks like. But I do know that the proper education is important to get there. That's where we get. Aristotle's kind of starting in the same place. He says, is there a good? Asking the same question. Okay. How does he argue that there must be a chief good? And I gave you a place to look. And did everybody understand the notation? The number and then the letter. Okay, okay. Why does there have to be a chief good above all the other goods? Why, Gabriel?
This might not be right, but I wrote that without like a chief good, our ends are pointless. That there's just no point. They're obsolete.
Okay, well, they're not completely obsolete. So, Gabriel, if I don't have cookies are not the chief good of man. I want to make that perfectly clear. Don't go home and tell your mom that I believe that. But if they were, would going to the grocery store be pointless? No, because I can still pick up other things. And I mean, I do need to live. I have to consume something.
Yeah.
So it's not so much that all my actions will be pointless as I do this for this, and this is for this, and this is for this, and this is for this. And if there's no chief end, what happens? It goes to a circle or infinity forever. Everything I do is for the sake of something else, which is for the sake of something else, which is for the sake of something else, and it never stops. Which, okay, I'll buy that. There must be some reason. You know, like why did you go to Farm and Fleet to buy garden seeds? And why did you buy garden seeds to plant the garden? And why are you planting a garden to grow vegetables? And why are you growing vegetables to make salsa? I'm buying tomatoes and peppers, just in case you're wondering. And then why are you making the salsa? To eat it and enjoy it. So, in other words, why did you go to Farm and Fleet? To eat and enjoy salsa. But if it just kept going, you'd never have an end to that. So Aristotle argues there must be an end, a goal, if that's not going to happen. If everything we do isn't pointless exactly, but Gabriel, I can see how it might become to feel pointless. It would be like walking and walking or running and never getting to the finish line. Never getting to the place you're going to because it keeps moving farther away from you. And that would be very frustrating. So this is what he says. There must be a chief good, something for which we do everything else, even eating the cookies. So he says, I want to look into what this supreme good, and he says, presumably, this would be the most authoritative and directive science. Whatever the chief good is going to be the one with the most authority over the most other areas, and the one that directs lives most. And he says, clearly, this description fits the science of politics. And this is the place I warned you about, right? Living with other people as a social human being. We have to live with other people. For it is political science that describes what subjects are to be taught in states and which of these the different sections of the community are to learn and up to what point. So what's one thing that politics, remember in the sense of the ancient world, the government of the polis decides what the education is going to be like, just like Socrates' city. Yeah, Emma.
That's a question. Why is the inquiry open to the nature of happiness?
Oh, did I blow that up?
I don't know.
Probably. Let me see. I directed us to 1094B. Okay. Yes. So would you like, do you have an answer for that, Emma?
Yes.
Go ahead and give it.
Learning is what makes the community thrive instead of just an individual. which is what we talked about in Plato, that's finer and better. Politics does that.
Yes, yes. So it is a more authoritative and directive telling you what to do. And then here on line 5, he says, but if politics makes use of the other sciences, and what's he talking about? War, property management, education, public speaking. It includes all of those things, running a community of people. He says, if it makes use of these other sciences and also lays down what we should do and what we should from what we should refrain, its end must include theirs. So, if the goal of military science is to win wars and protect your people, well, now why do you want to win wars and protect your people? What's the goal of that? The community, right? Public speaking, education, what's the goal? Well, so they'll grow up and they'll be good speakers and they'll be good citizens. Well, why do you want that? Because it's good for the community. You see? So if all of these things we do are good for us living together in community, then their ends, their goals, must be under the umbrella of political science, which directs our lives together. All of those things direct our lives together. It kind of makes sense. If it kind of makes sense, that's good enough, I feel like. I put a note to myself at the bottom. He says this right after that. First, this is Aristotle, not my note. Even if the good of the community coincides with that of the individual, it is clearly a greater and more perfect thing to achieve and preserve that of a community. Even if it so happens that the same things make you happy and your community happy. That's awesome. But it's always more important to make the community happy. We heard that before, didn't we? Socrates, remember they said, Socrates, doesn't sound like you're making these guardians very happy.
Yep, the guardians.
And what did he say back?
He was saying it's for the good of the community.
You forgot. We are not worried about individuals. We are worried about the community. And here's the note I wrote at the bottom. Sometime I read through this. I said, we don't think that way. We care about individuals. We really think individual rights trump everything. It's hard to put ourselves in that mindset where the community is more important. But think about that. That's the way we are as Americans and citizens. But think how we are as members of the body of Christ. If it is good for the body of Christ that someone be martyred, first of all, it is good for them because they get to go be with Jesus. But you know what I mean. From an earthly perspective, it doesn't seem good. Or to be tortured or undergo horrible trials. But this is what the body of Christ needs. Perhaps it needed that example. Perhaps it needed that. With the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church, right? Tertullian says. The blood of the martyrs is seed. It's inspiring and planting new Christians. So, as Christians, I think we can embrace this a little more than your average modern person is like, no, I'm an individual and I want my rights. And as Christians, we're not so much about, what are my rights? It's, what does the body need? Mm-hmm. And if the body needs me to do something I don't want to do, I'll do it. This is my calling. But Aristotle, remember their religion, it wasn't like that. It was a civic duty, right? You go and you give your sacrifice to Diana or Apollo, whatever. You give your offering and you've discharged your duty. But this is almost their religion. Okay. Make sense so far? All right. We've got time. Aristotle says twice in what I had you read, something I didn't ask you a question about. But it's a very good thing to keep in mind. He mentions it in other books as well. He says, we're going to look into politics for a little while. But the heading of this chapter is Politics is not an exact science. And he says this, it is the mark of a trained mind never to expect more precision in the treatment of any subject than the nature of that subject permits. For demanding logical demonstrations from a teacher of rhetoric is clearly about as reasonable as accepting mere plausibility from a mathematician. If someone's doing math problems and they say, I don't know, it's probably pretty close. If somebody's building a bridge that you're going to drive over, you're like, all right, how's that design? I don't know. I'm pretty sure the numbers they're close. They're close enough. Driving over that bridge. Likewise, you don't ask someone who's writing a speech to, like, do the calculations of the speech to tell me whether or not it's a good speech. What do they add up the words, the proportions of syllables? What? No. This is why I tell you guys sometimes when I edit your papers, it's hard to say. These are the general guidelines, but it's kind of an art. It's not a math paper you're doing for me. I can't, we do have rules that we follow, but pretty much you're all past the rules. You know, like period at the end of the sentence, capital letter at the beginning, right? And it's more, well, but what if you rephrase it like this? So it's an art. So Aristotle wants to make sure he's not going to write you a scientific treatise that you can go through steps of logic and follow. He's going to talk about things that are probable, likely, things that most people believe. Does it make sense? You can't take literally everything and set up your own, it was really interesting you talking about whether Socrates' city was the best regime, right? And another question I almost asked you is and they did ask him, could it even happen? And do we think he meant it to happen? Did he actually think you should build this? As a matter of fact, I really meant to read this part to you. He said, we don't get philosopher kings because there's no good regime. And they said, oh, perhaps it's the one that we're building, or maybe that one could never happen. And he said, maybe not. He said, maybe in heaven. And what he meant was not that in heaven, we're going to indiscriminately have children. That was his heaven. But that he wasn't intending something to be realistic, right? It was analogical. So Aristotle's saying the same thing. Don't take this too literally. He said political science is not like mathematics. We can't measure it and say this one's good and this one's bad. All right. This is interesting. Why is a young man not equipped to be a student of politics? Gabriel.
Because a man needs to be a good critic to judge rightly. It needs to be a specialist at what he does and have a really good education. Young men just don't really tend to have those things as they're just starting out.
Okay. What makes someone a good critic? Experience. Right? Again, back to my ice cream. The good critic of ice cream would be someone who's gone to a lot of different places, tried all the flavors, right? And then been to various establishments and tried soft serve versus hard ice cream and then been to lots of soft serve places and knows this one melts faster than that one and whatnot. And that takes time. Even becoming a good ice cream critic would take some time. Unless, if you don't want to become enormous and eat it all really fast. You should spread it out over time. So, you need experience and education to really judge well. And he said, you know what? I apologize. Young people don't tend to have that. And what is this reflected at all in our Constitution?
A little bit. You can't be a president until you're over like a certain age.
You have to be 35. There are lower limit on ages for representatives, senators, and president of the United States. You can't be 20 years old and run for president. Because they knew. No, you don't want that. You need someone with a little more experience. Remember, even Socrates maybe would have agreed with this, because what did he say? They have this education and they leave the metaphorical cave. Then we make them go back down and serve among the people. Not literally down from somewhere, but from the heights of contemplation of the good. Because they have experience, because they've experienced it. So Aristotle's giving us some warnings here at the beginning. First of all, there must be some goal, or else everything we do becomes pointless because it goes on forever. That goal has to do with us living in society together. And when we talk about whatever that goal is and living in society, this is not an exact science. It's like Socrates. Well, you say giving back what is owed is just, but what if somebody goes crazy? And see, you can't just make blanket rules like that about things. Okay, let's move on. In section 4, he says this is the subject heading. The end is no doubt happiness, but views of happiness differ. I need to talk about that word happiness. Have you ever heard the word happenstance or by hap? These are very old-fashioned phrases. Do you know what they mean? If something happens comes from it too. Happen, happenstance, happiness comes from the same root. Hap is chance or luck. It happened. It just happened. It just happened, right? We say that for things that we're not quite sure about the causes of. This happened, right? Sometimes we say it that way when we don't want to admit that we know the cause or we are the cause. I don't know. The glass fell and it broke. That happened. No. Mrs. Ferguson was doing the dishes and they get slippery, Just this week I've broken 2 glasses in the last 3 weeks. I'm just not safe. It didn't happen, but sometimes we say it that way. But some things do happen. Listen to this. If happiness, the English word, is related to happen and happenstance and by hap, what does that imply about happiness? What causes happiness?
Chance.
Yeah. It's like, I got up and I'm feeling good and the sun is shining and I have a good day planned. I'm happy. Right? I got up and my back hurts and it's raining and I got to go out in the rain. And then my mom wanted me to take out the trash in the rain. See, now I'm not happy. Because the things that happened don't make me happy. So here's our problem. When we read this, the end is no doubt happiness. This sounds very shallow. There's lots of things make me happy. They don't make me happy for long, perhaps. But I want to read something out of the introduction to you, okay? Because remember, this is a translation. The notion of eudaimonia. Eudaimonia is eudaimonia. All right. Do you guys remember the daimon thing from last week that I talked about? All right. So, whatever. Spiritual, supernatural influence, whereas the gods. Does anybody know what EU on the front of a word tends to mean? Trying to think of an example. Tolkien, J.R. Tolkien coined a phrase, a eucatastrophe. A eulogy. We give a eulogy when somebody dies, right? At the funeral, somebody, logos, they say words. What kind of words do you say about the dead people? Good things. You don't say, this guy was a dirty, rotten scoundrel. We're so glad he's gone. That is not ever, ever, ever appropriate at a funeral. It's true. Don't say, yeah. If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. So you means good or well. So this means having a good spirit in you. It means closer to what we mean by joy. And it's not a fleeting thing like happiness is. You're happy, and then something crummy happens and suddenly you're just not happy anymore. That's happiness. It's nice when you're happy, but you're not going to stay happy. Something's going to happen. You're going to trip and fall. Something's going to happen. You're going to break your favorite thing, whatever. But eudaimonia is not the same thing. It's a persistent state. So he says, okay, the notion of eudaimonia is closely tied in a way which the notion of happiness is not, to success, but not the success you think he means. The eudaimon is someone who makes a success of his life and actions, who realizes his aims and ambitions as a man who fulfills himself. Eudaimonia, happiness, is thinking about this. What am I for? What am I here for? What am I meant to be? The eudaimon man fulfills his purpose, right? The purpose of those cookies were to be eaten and enjoyed. That is their eudaimon. Fortunately, they're not sentient and they're being eaten. But you see what I mean? It's like sometimes we used to joke, the Christmas tree. If you get a real tree and then they're looking kind of shaggy, by January, and you throw it out and then, the needles are falling off or whatever. Like, oh, but he fulfilled his purpose, right? The purpose of that tree, he was grown in a Christmas tree farm. And his purpose was to be cut down and decorated and celebrate with the family, and he's lived out his purpose. That tree is eudaimon.
Dark.
I know that is kind of dark. But so I know that it's like, we're never going to get through all these questions. Maybe not. But if we're thinking and we're learning something, this is good enough for me. So this is a big question. Aristotle's not saying what makes us happy. He's saying, how do we fulfill ourselves as human beings? That's big.
Indeed.
A lot of things will make us happy, but not a lot of things will fulfill you as a human being. Okay, let's see if we can at least get to why he's talking about ethics in this. Okay, so No, I did not. What is Aristotle's definition of the ultimate or final good? This is in paragraph 1098a. Virtue. Is that all? Let me find it. 298a. Oh, that's all I wrote. What is happiness? Actually, he does. What did you say again? Virtue.
Virtue.
Mm-hmm. he says this, the good for man, this is on line 17, maybe 18 in that paragraph. The good for man is an activity of the soul in accordance with virtue. So now he's actually said several things there. It's an activity. It happens in your soul. And it's accordance with virtue. And now we have to talk about what virtue means. What do we mean when we say virtue? Somebody is virtuous. They're what?
Like kind?
That would be a virtue.
Holy.
Holy, just, fair, virtuous, morally good. We mean this is a morally good person. If somebody, this example. If somebody is an Olympic sprinter, would we say that makes them virtuous? No, because they could be a dirty, rotten scoundrel and be an Olympic sprinter. But this is like the eudaimon thing. Virtue means living out your purpose. Virtue is the purpose. So the Greek philosophers say things like this. The virtue of the eye is sight, is seeing. A virtuous eye is an eye that can see. That's its virtue. We still use this phrase when we say in virtue of, right? And we're not talking about moral virtue at all. You know, he's a good runner in virtue of the fact that he broke a world record. But we don't mean anything about moral virtue when we use that phrase. This is the way they use it. So it's an activity. It's something you do. Happiness is something you do. This is something that happens to you, right? It's in your soul. And it's in accordance with virtue, which means living out your purpose. And what is that purpose? The purpose of a human being. He still hasn't told us what that purpose is. But he says, this is our provisional. This is our because he's got a whole book to discuss it. This is going to be our initial definition. What is the thing? I do this for this, I do this for this, I do this for this. Where's the end? An activity of your soul in accordance with virtue. Okay, let's see where he goes from there. This takes us into our book 2 questions. All right. So, actually, just a second. I think I'm skipping, just a second. There's something that I didn't want to skip. Oh, yeah, this is before we move on to book 2. Perhaps we had better examine the universal and consider critically what is meant by it, although such a course is awkward because the forms were introduced by friends of ours. He means Plato. He says, maybe we should look at whether there's a virtue, there's the good. Yet surely it would be better, or rather necessary, to refute in defense of the truth even views to which one is attached. This whole universal good thing. He says, there's a problem with my friend Plato, my teacher Plato, and it is this. Things are called good in as many senses as they are said to exist. We've talked about this before. Pizza is good. That's a good dog. That was a good book. God is very good. And we do not mean the same thing in any of those. Not unless you're eating your dog. Don't eat your dog. And even so, it wouldn't be the same as eating a pizza. I think a good dog and a good pizza wouldn't mean the same thing.
Just don't.
Okay. But you see, we call good, this is why when some of you were younger and you did IEW with me or whatever, and good was a popular banned word, because good is very vague for us. And so he said, "What's the problem with the good? What is it? What does he mean? What kind of the good? Could be the good of everything. Is the good of the dog the same as the good of the painting, and the good of the story, and the good of the food?" And he said, now we have all these different kinds of goods. Plato, but Aristotle. Look, we got to examine individual things. I'm going to, in this book, talk about the good of man. But the good of a dog or the good of a tree, see, that can't just be one good. Even though I loved Plato and he was a great teacher and a brilliant man, I don't agree. I think we have to look at these individual groups and decide what is their virtue, what is their goodness. But Plato's just really like, there is the good. We must see the good. So anyway, I didn't want to skip that because I promised you when we looked at that picture that we would see him saying, should we look at the universal? Maybe not. Maybe we need to look at the particular. He says, it is possible for the state of goodness, for example, to be present in a person without affecting any good result. For example, if he is asleep. You're not doing anybody any good if you're asleep. But you might say, he's a good man, but he's not demonstrating it. It's possible for the state to be present, but not the activity while he's asleep. To be genuinely good, he needs to be doing something good. He needs to not be asleep. So it is that those who act rightly win the honors and rewards in life. So this is how he works his way to it's an activity of the soul. It's not just a state, right? The good, the goal of life is not just a state of being, because you could be asleep. You could be in a coma and have that state of being. You wouldn't even know it. It can't be that. It must be an activity. All right. So in book 2, he's going to examine what kind of activity that means when he says it's in accordance with virtue. An activity of the soul in accordance with virtue. What are the 2 kinds of virtue? Emma.
Intellectual and moral.
Yes, we can have intellectual virtue. And remember, by virtue he means fulfilling the purpose, right? Excellence. Excellence would be a good synonym for us to use. Which one of those is mostly habit? Intellectual or moral?
Moral virtue.
Moral virtue. How do we get intellectual virtue?
By learning.
By learning. We're trying to do it right now together. We're struggling with Aristotle. We're trying to understand better. We're asking ourselves questions like, what is the purpose of life according to them? Is this the same thing that the church teaches us is the purpose of life? And so we're trying to grow in intellectual virtue. Moral virtue, though, he says, is developed by habit. So how does developing a virtuous habit work in a circle? It's a good time to talk about that one, too. Yeah, Gabriel.
By refraining from pleasures, we become more temperate, and then by becoming more temperate, we can abstain from pleasures.
Okay, that's exactly the one he uses, yes. See, when you do a good thing, it makes you stronger to do it again. It makes you more of that sort of person who can do it. Okay, here's a real life example. I mean, honest to goodness. So, I mean, many of us just got done with Lent not very long ago. And so during Lent, that's not something I'm eating. And for Orthodox, it's every day, right? So I'm not eating that. And then, and I'm a sucker, as you guys know, because I bring it up all the time, for sweets. I like sweets. But see, Lent is over now, but you do it for so long, and then I go through the checkout aisle, the checkout aisle where all the candy bars are. It's tough. It's tough. And then right before that, they put the bakery stuff in the little single serve. It's like, oh, you could just take home one muffin, right? But I'm not really getting those right now. You see what I mean? I'm off. I'm just not in the habit of picking anything like that up. Now, unfortunately, it may happen that I will fall and I will get back in the habit. I would like to not be in that habit, but it could happen. But by refraining, I made myself more of the person who is able to refrain. And so that first one might be hard. I've decided I'm not going to do this. Look at me, I didn't do it. Now don't get all puffed up and proud of yourself, because pride is also not actually Aristotle didn't think pride was a vice. That is a Christian idea, that humility is better. But yes, it works in a circle. If you begin a habit, a virtuous habit, it will work itself around in a circle. He says, moral virtues are engendered in us, neither by nor contrary to nature. You are born with a human nature. Your nature doesn't come automatically with moral virtue. If you spend any time with a small child, you will know this almost immediately. Just little terrors. But he says it's also not contrary to our nature. We are created, we are made, we are here to do moral acts. Now remember, Aristotle doesn't have a concept of the fall, of sin, right? But he does realize this. Doing moral things isn't against our nature. Even he knew how good you feel when you do a good thing. But he also knows it doesn't come to us automatically. We don't just come into the world, even though it's our nature is receptive to being virtuous. He says, so it's not by nature, but it's not contrary to nature. We are constituted by nature to receive them, the virtues. But their full development in us is due to habit. What do you think of that? I mean, does anybody have a reaction to that? Think of a good, you don't have to share, all right? But think of a good habit that you've tried to develop. It doesn't have to be even moral. Like, you exercise every day, or you try to watch less TV, or, whatever habit. First of all, is it easy to develop a habit?
Not in the beginning, usually.
It does depend on what the habit is. It depends how much trouble it is. But it's often hard to keep consistently following through. Even when it seems like something you really want. Right? We're going to talk about that in a minute too. But what do you really want out of this is important. So we know that changing a habit you already have can be very difficult. You oversleep and you want to get in the habit of waking up earlier in the morning. In those first few, it's really hard. You're tired because your body is not adjusted to it. So, but have you ever thought of being an excellent human being, a virtuous human being in terms of habit? We usually think of it I usually think of it on a small scale. I'm in the habit, I'm eating too much sugar right now and I don't feel good. Or I'm in the habit of not getting up early enough. But I don't really think, do I have a habit of gentleness? a habit of kindness. All right. So he says it is a habit. This activity, I'll go back. It's an activity of the soul in accordance with virtue. That's eudaimonia, the thing he's calling habit. The goal, the end goal of everything we do, eudaimonia. So we're working towards that, and he says it starts with a habit. Because it's the activity of the soul in accordance with virtue, in accordance to a habit that we develop. Okay, what is the difference between happening to perform a virtuous act and doing them regularly? Emma?
You need to know that you're doing good in order for it to actually be good.
Okay, yes. First of all, we don't accidentally become virtuous. We could accidentally do a good thing. We could be meaning to do a bad thing and accidentally do a good thing. But you don't become a virtuous person accidentally because you don't accidentally perform a habit. So, did anybody else have, that is very true. Did anybody add anything to that? Did I direct you to for a place?
No.
I did not, did I?
Kind of said you have to choose it.
Okay.
For its own sake.
Okay, which goes very much along with what Emma said. Okay, let me read this. This is basically what you two said. Virtuous acts are not done in a just or temperate way merely because they have a certain quality, but only if the agent, the person doing it, also acts in a certain state. That is, 1, if he knows what he's doing, 2, if he chooses it for its own sake, and 3, if he does it from a fixed and permanent disposition. Then he goes on to talk about what we mean by a disposition. He said there's 3 things in our soul. We have feelings, we have faculties, and we have dispositions. Feelings, we all know what feelings are. He means the same thing by feelings as we do. Feelings come and go. You're responsible for what you do with them. Everybody gets angry. If you kick people because you're angry, this is not a good thing, right? If you go and take a deep breath and count to 10 or something like that before you speak, this would be a good way to handle it. If you hit a wall, you're going to hurt yourself. All right, that's feeling. Faculty is capability of doing something. You have the capability of seeing and hearing, all of you. You have the capability of reading a book by Aristotle. But he said that's still not what we're looking for. Virtue isn't a feeling. I feel like a virtuous person. Virtue isn't I'm capable of being virtuous. Great. Good for you. How about you do something? He says it's a disposition. It's how we normally react. We all know some people are grumpy all the time. I hope you don't know one or live with one. I hope you are not one. We would say they have a grumpy disposition, right? Or somebody just has a lighthearted, basically happy disposition. They just seem happy, or they have a friendly disposition. They talk to strangers easily, and right. Some people have a quiet disposition, right? They just prefer a little solitude, a little quiet, a little space, right? That's your disposition. It doesn't mean you're incapable of going outside of it. It means this is the way you're made. And he says, virtue, to be virtue, is a disposition. It's a habit, which is like saying it's a habit. So the person who does it once. Okay. It is therefore right to say that a man becomes just by the performance of just, and temperate by the performance of temperate acts. Nor is there the smallest likelihood of any man's becoming good by not doing them. This is not, however, the course that most people follow. They have recourse to their principle and imagine they are being philosophical, and that in this way they will become serious-minded. I'm just going to think about it. He said, they're rather like invalids who listen carefully to their doctor but carry out none of his instructions. You gotta do it. You gotta do it or it's not virtuous. And you gotta know you're doing it. And you've gotta do it on purpose and choose it, all right? To the point where it becomes habitual and it's your disposition. That's virtue, all right? But he's not done talking about it yet. He says, a provisional definition of virtue. Here's his provisional definition. It is a purposive disposition. It's a disposition, and it's purposive. You make these decisions on purpose. Lying in a mean that is relative to us and determined by a rational principle that a prudent man would use to determine it. Like, ooh, okay, we don't know what we're talking about anymore. I got purposive disposition. I'm normally like this, and I'm that way on purpose. It's virtue. But lying in a mean. Okay, here's what he says, and actually, this is what you can tell me. What does he mean? What does he mean by the mean? Or the middle of a virtue? What is the mean?
Like you could probably figure out it's the middle, like the balance, not going too overboard, not going too little, finding the right balance.
Finding the right balance. So, for example, he says, virtue aims to hit the mean. By virtue, I mean moral virtue, since it is this that is concerned with feeling and actions. And these involve excess, deficiency, and a mean. It is possible, for example, to feel fear, confidence, desire, anger, pity, and pleasure and pain generally, too much or too little. And both of these are wrong. But to have these feelings at the right times, on the right grounds, towards the right people, for the right motive, and in the right way, is to feel them in an intermediate, that is, to a best degree, and this is the mark of virtue. Virtue then aims at hitting the mean. I love this. Failure is possible in many ways, but success in only one. It is easy to miss the target and difficult to hit it. Think of how you're shooting an arrow. Think of how many ways there are to miss the target. Almost infinite. Too far, too close. You just skimmed it. It could be a little off. It could be a little more off, to the point where you just you shoot it behind you. I don't know how you're a really bad archer if you shot it behind you, and I'm not standing behind you if you're going to do that sort of thing. But there's only one bullseye. It's like that. It's really hard. So and then he goes on, and frankly, almost all of this book is a discussion of finding that mean. And he examines all of these things we consider virtues and what the mean would look like. So courage is a really easy one. Someone who feels no fear whatsoever, they just run right out on the battlefield. They just run right out. This is not a good idea. That's stupid. But on the far other end is the guy who's just cowering. I don't know. He's like in his under the bed in his bunk in the bunkhouse with the pillow over his head, and he's scared to death, and he refuses to go out on the battlefield. We would not call him virtuous either. The virtuous guy is somewhere in the middle, right? So it's not that he's fearless, but he's taken it into good account, and he has assessed either his power versus the enemy's power, or maybe his duty to do whatever, and he goes out and does it. This is in the middle. But here's the tricky thing. The mean isn't the same in every situation, right? So, what can I say? Okay, so you have a friend who is the quiet type, and you have another friend that would be, we'll say, garrulous and very friendly, right? And you want to, you're friends with both of them, and you want to hit the excellent, virtually excellent manner of speaking with them. And you see, it's probably not going to be the same in each case. The mean for the quiet friend is going to be closer to the quietness, right? So it's not, again, remember what Aristotle said, and remember why he said it. It's not math. We can't say, this is rashness, complete lack of fear. This is cowardice, consumed by fear. And then if you get a ruler out, and then measure and divide in two, you will find the mean. Because in some battles, retreating might be smart. In some battles, retreating might be cowardly. For some friends, being a little more on the quiet side, this is the proper mean for them. For some with it, like a little more activity and a little more talking, well then it shifts. And that discerning, again, what he said, the right thing at the right time in the right way under the right circumstances, that's virtue. That's kind of a tall order. So now maybe you can understand why he writes a whole book looking at this, because it can be difficult. Because failure is possible in many ways. Okay. Then he points out, not every action or feeling admits of a mean. There's no way to be a middle-ish murderer or bank robber. Right, well, I only do it a little bit. Like, no, don't do it at all. He says, some have names that directly connote depravity. Malice, shamelessness, envy. You can't just be moderately envious. It's always bad to be envious. Theft, murder. He said some things are just evil in themselves. He says we're not going to talk about those. Hopefully we all know what those things are. And so he points out things like courage, temperance, use of money is a good one. People who are hoarders, like an Ebenezer Scrooge, versus, the prodigal son, who just spends all his money. And by the way, this is always of interest to me. Do y'all know why the prodigal son is called prodigal? What does prodigal mean? Do you know? Because we all know he's the prodigal son. It does not. I don't think so. It means spending all your money. He's prodigal not because he runs away, it's because he wastes everything. That's what made him prodigal. And in my translation, it actually uses that term. It says, in the field of giving and receiving money, the mean is liberality. He's a liberal man. He knows when to give and how much to give. The excess and deficiency are prodigality. I spend all my money all the time and everything. And illiberality, which we would call, what's Scrooging? Avarice. That's not exactly it. What is an adjective that describes he wants to keep, he hoards, he's a miser. Miser. This is what I'm trying to think of. Scrooge, that old miser. And then he goes through a lot of them, ambition and boastfulness, wit. He goes on for quite a while. Now, here's another thing to put into the mix of learning to be a virtuous person. Why do we want to be virtuous? Because our excellence, our happiness is an activity of the soul in accordance with virtue. Remember, what Aristotle is saying, it's what we were made for. We were made to be excellent in this way. He says, it is the things towards which we have the stronger natural inclination that seem to us more opposed to the mean. Okay, for example, let's have a line here. Okay, we have two extremes. On one extreme, we have, I don't want to do anything that seems like that it might apply to anybody here, but it's not, I don't have anything in mind. I'm just trying to think of something that seems relatable. Because I used it before, let's use talkative. And I mean mega talkative. Never shuts up. And quiet. And this by this quiet, this extreme would be you never say anything. You just can't get them to say anything. All right? So I don't mean generally talkative. These are the far extremes. This one just will never stop. And that one you can't get a peep. All right? But there's almost nobody like that, right? We're all somewhere here. Now, we're going to say, here we have the mean. You talk the right amount at the right time to the right people in the right volume with your indoor voice or outdoor voice or whatever, okay? But if you are naturally a more talkative person, you are here. And you look at someone who is here. All right, you're both about the same distance from the mean. Which one do you think is going to be closer to the mean, yourself or the other person?
You're probably going to think you are closer to it.
You're going to think you are, and here's why. When you see that fairly quiet person over there, you're looking, I realize this is all metaphorical. You're not actually looking past anything. This line doesn't exist, right? It's in our imagination. But you're looking past the mean all the way on the other side, and they seem so far away from you. And don't we all think we're roughly, I mean, in a lot of ways, we think we're, I'm good. I'm the right amount. Sometimes it's good to have a friend who you can honestly ask. Do I do this too much? But if you ask, you can't be offended, right? You have to be willing to take the answer. So he says, where you are relative to the mean affects how you feel about that mean. You feel like more talkativeness, that this person isn't nearly as close to the mean as you are. Because this is your natural disposition. So Aristotle says, you might have to tug yourself a little farther than feels like the mean to you. Right? I have talkative and quiet is a very good example. Trying to think of something else that, well, let's just use one of his. The rash person, the guy who just rushes into battle, and the total coward. All right? So this is the rash guy, and there's this guy, and he's over here. He's a little on the other side of perfect courage, but he's really deliberating about whether or not it's a good idea to go out. To you, he seems like a coward. He seems way over too far. You tend to be rash So you interpret the mean as more towards run out and do it. He leans towards the caution. So he interprets the mean as a little more on caution. So anyway, this is a summary of a couple of these chapters that I had you read. It's a lot to think about. And so remember what the oracle at Delphi, what was printed on the temple. There were two things. Does anybody remember what one of them was? It comes in very handy here. The one I'm not thinking of is nothing to excess, which also seems very good here. But the other one, know thyself. Know thyself. Where do I fall? When I go to a party or like a social event, I'm on this side. I really don't want to have to talk to new people. My husband and I go to the Christmas party for his work, and we just kind of hope nobody sits at our table, so we can just eat our dinner in peace. We don't want to talk to these people. And then sometimes, and so we have, there's a couple that we know, they're okay. But one year, we said we were just going to give dirty looks at everybody who came close to the We didn't. But we both lean that direction. So if we want to be sociable, when the president of the company comes around, oh, hey, Dave, and just shaking hands, we got to suck it up and push ourselves a little more the other direction, or we'll just come across as weird. That's the sort of thing. We know ourselves. We know that where we fall on this. Okay. So he spends this book discussing virtue. And by the way, book 9 on friendship is very interesting, and I find it to be one of the most accessible chapters because most of us have friends, and it's just interesting to see what he has to say. So he ends up in book 10 summing up. He says, it remains for us to give an account of happiness since we hold it to be the end of human conduct, the goal of human conduct. And he says, is it amusement? All those things that people say make you daimon, happy. Having money, having friends, having a good reputation. Remember what Cephalus says in the beginning of the Republic. They are down at the Piraeus, and Socrates says, oh, what's it like to be old? And he says, well, it's not so bad. Your body's wearing down. And he says, well, Socrates says, well, a lot of people would say it's just because you have money. And he says, well, money helps you with some. I said, I won't deny. Mostly it makes you not fall into injustice. The things that people say it is. But he says, if happiness is an activity in accord with virtue, it is reasonable to assume that it is in accordance with the highest virtue. And this will be the virtue of the best part of us. And he says, well, what is the best part of us? It's contemplation. That activity is not running around doing things. Even though developing the habit requires action, contemplation is the highest form of activity. So says Aristotle. Thinking about the gods. However, he says, but such a life will be too high for human attainment. For any man who lives, it will do so not as a human being, but in virtue of something divine within him. No one can do that on his own power. And he says, but we ought, listen to this phrase, and I'll leave you with this, but we ought, so far as in us lies, to put on immortality and do all that we can to live in conformity with the highest that is in us. For even if it is small in bulk, In power and preciousness, it far excels all the rest. You know, the Apostle Paul tells us to put on Christ, put on immortality. This is very interesting to me. Okay, you have no writing. You have one assignment, and it is this. Some of you may have this book at home already. If you do not, don't worry, okay? But some of you, for a former class or a sibling for a former class, may have bought Plutarch's Lives. It's in volume 2. But I'm going to go home after I leave, and I'm going to send out an email, and it is going to have a link to Plutarch's Life of Alexander the Great, and it's just right there. If nobody minds, I mean, you could print it all out. It's like 40 pages. I don't know why you would want to. But you could read it on your phone. You can read it on screen, okay? Just have your mom send you the link, and just that's what I want you to do. I want you to read Plutarch's Life of Alexander the Great. You will find it in this book, volume 2, but you will also find it online, and I will send you a link to it. There are questions in the book, and we're going to talk about what happened after the time of Aristotle. By the way, we've gotten to this place because Aristotle was Alexander's teacher. Alexander the Great had Aristotle as his tutor. His dad hired him. Aristotle was private tutor. Oh my gosh. So we will wrap up the year with a look at that Hellenistic world, that world that Alexander helped create, and then in turn helped create the world that Christianity inhabited and produced the Bible in Greek, and why in Greek. All right, that's it. Read, and if you have this, great. If you have it in another book, if you happen to have a copy of Plutarch's Alexander, it doesn't have to be this translation, but I will send you all a link. So if you get the emails, great, you'll get it. If you don't get them personally, just ask your mom, where's the link? Oh, and do you have something for me? Okay, thank you. That's it, and I'll see you next week.